Thanks, Matt. Yeah,
So-
please start.
So my name's Matt Pestel, just for those of you who don't know me, and I'm very much new to this business. It's only very recently that I've sort of decided to think about coming into this. My father was a piano technician back in the States, and several years ago he retired from that, and he's kept his workshop and everything all intact, even though we all knew that he was never going to. He's got a degenerative condition which affects his fine motor skills, so there's no way he's going back to working on pianos, but he kept his workshop anyway. A couple of years ago he sort of dropped a bomb at the breakfast table when I was visiting and said, I think I'm ready to get rid of my tools. So we went downstairs and we spent 3 days going through all of his tools, and just as a favor to him, to help my father, I loaded up all of the piano specific tools into my suitcase and brought them back to New Zealand. So I've got a case over there of things that I have absolutely no idea what they do, so I'll be picking people's ears from time to time to try to figure that out. But I enrolled myself in Rick Butler's course after doing some investigation of how does one learn this trade. So without this NZQA or anything, your options are reasonably restricted unless you want to go overseas, and I quite like it here, and plus there's a pandemic, so we're not going to be doing that. So the way Rick Butler's course works is that the first section is on tune, right? And you learn the theory of the temperament and all of those things, and which is all well and good and everything, but in order to check it, you have to send in videos of yourself doing these exercises. So you set up your video camera and you try to tune perfect fifths, perfect fourths, and then try to temper them and this, that, and the other. And it's got a whole bunch of exercises that you have to go through. Now, I don't own an ETD, and Rick doesn't teach using an ETD, but he wants you to have one. So of course there's, you can, any software will tell you so many cents flat or sharp, and that's good enough. So for example, when an exercise is to tune F3 through A3 using the ETD, and then start moving outwards from there. So using that as your baseline, those are the types of exercises that you do. Did several of those, and you'd make a video and you'd send it off to Washington, D.C., via uploading it and the like. 4 or 5 days later, you'd get the feedback that, I think that interval was a bit too wide and that one was a bit too narrow, and so I'd like you to try this again. And by this time, of course, the piano that you've done the exercise on is completely changed because you've been doing other exercises in the intervening 4 or 5 days. So it's really difficult to go back and check. And I just thought, there has to be a better way to do this. This is silly. Yeah, maybe it was left or right of where we wanted it, and maybe not. But then the lockdown came, and I needed something to work on anyway, and I'm a software guy, so it occurred to me that the web audio interface, which became standard in the IT industry a long time ago, years ago, has what's called an oscillator node, which allows you to produce a tone. So here, for instance, is 440. That's just a pure sine wave. Yeah. So this is another. Yeah. So this is just a web page where you dial in what you want, and there's 447. Now, if you were to do, I happened to discover quite by accident, just like this, with 2 different things open. So here's 440 on that tab. There's 447 simultaneously. There's 7 beats a second of interference pattern. So,
like Dom, yeah. I'm sure that's how we got in shape.
with that information, I thought, that's quite interesting, because that means that I can play multiple tones at the same time, and in fact you can even control the volume of secondary ones. So by doing that, I had the idea that I could simulate a note on a note and the upper partials. So here we have A3 at 220 hertz. At the same time, we've got 440 and a little bit, and 660 and a little bit more. So what you're hearing when I play that note is all 6 of those tones. It's not actually descending order of volume in them, but they're there. Okay, now if I wanted to change the strength of those upper partials, I'll put a little slider in here. So now we're on the pure sine wave of 220, and now we're bringing in the upper ones. So it's just sort of changing the timbre of the tone. And I'm simulating inharmonicity here. Right? So it's not just 440, it's 440 and a bit, as you see there. Now the number in parentheses is the number of amounts and cents sharp of the integer multiple. So that's 0.62 cents sharp of 440. Right? And that's 1.4 cents sharp of 660. Right? And 2.48 sharp of 881. Now, that's the inharmonicity characteristic of this particular piano that I've loaded up, which I have modeled on the Steinway A in my lounge, which is a machine that I don't touch. That's my partner's piano. It's a very nice piano. But if you want all the technical stuff, this is the measurements that I took off of that piano, and calculated based on guess at Young's modulus, which is the the amount of force it takes to stretch a piece of wire to twice its distance. And this is how we find out the inharmonicity. There's there's an equation which tells you the frequency of the upper partials based on the stiffness of the string, basically. So, using these coefficients of these strings, which I've just put in for one particular instrument. In fact, I've built 2 instruments here. The other instrument isn't particularly exciting. It's just an ideal string piano, which is 0 inharmonicity. So it's 220, 440, 660, 880.
35 feet long.
35 feet long, yeah. No, infinitely long, actually. So I've only got one in here, and so far, for what I've needed it for, so what this gives you then is that when you played in F and an A, you can hear the beat rates there, right? And you can not only hear them, but you can tell that this is a major third. The ratio is 5:4. And the 5th partial of the lower note is at 874.47. The 4th partial of the upper note is at 881, therefore giving you a beats per second of 6.79. And now, if you find it easier, as I do, 6.79 doesn't really mean much to me. Triplets at 136 versus triplets at 139, that means something to me. You know, for instance, when I go to find 7 beats a second, I don't know how you do it, but, well, obviously if you've done it as much as you folks have, you don't need to think about it. But when you're starting out like me, how do you find 7 beats a second? I have to find mnemonics to do that, so I need to know that 7 beats a second is triplets at 139, right? And 139 is Michael Jackson's Beat It. So, there's 7 beats a second. That's how I have to think.
Riders on the Storm.
Right. Kevin uses Riders on the Storm. It's also semiquavers at 102. So find your favorite. What's at 102? The other one that I use is the Bee Gees' "Staying Alive." That's approximately 102. So if you want semiquavers instead of triplets, I'll use that. So. Okay, so that's all well and good, except for the fact that this inharmonicity, of course, makes us stretch things. Right? And if you put well, at least the ETD that I use on the GarageBand project that comes with any Mac, and I happen to have a Mac here, then it tells you, I'll tune a note, and then I'd whack the ETD on, and it tells me, well, that's 1.5 cents flat. And I was quite frustrated for quite a long time until I realized that, yes, exactly, it is 1.5 cents flat. It's 1.5 cents flat of 220, right? But it's where I want it. It's where I want to tune that note. So, for example, I'll go back a step. So we'll turn on the tuning fork here. So the fork is not sounding the third partial. I'm going to, did you hear the third partial come in?
Yeah.
Hang on. That's quite strong. So now the reason that's in there is because Rick Butler's method of setting A440 is quite interesting in that it assumes a certain amount of inharmonicity in the string. And you use that third partial to calibrate your so you can hear the wobbling up at the third partial at 3.5 beats a second. Right? So that's Rick's method, is to you run it off of that. So here's the first exercise that we do. We put our tuning pin, we activate the tuning pin on A4, we knock it out of tune. So A4 is randomly knocked, I don't know which direction, right? We put the tuning fork on. The arrow keys on your keyboard here move the pitch. Up and down arrows move it about 1 cent. Left and right arrows move it about 0.1 cents. But it's not exact. There's a little bit of random dither that's involved. And that's so that you can't, 1, 2, 3, 4 cents, 0.5. And it's random. You've got to listen to it. You can't just feel it, right? So it's a purely listening exercise. So let's try it. Tuning fork. Quite fast. You can see when I move it down, you get the red feedback there. So we're looking for on the order of 3.5 beats per second. I don't know how you find 3.5 beats a second. Think of your favorite song that you use for that. See how we did. Data. 0.3 cents flat. Right. So that's going to get you 100% on the RPT exam in the States anyway. Right? Anything within 0.9 in the US. I'm doing Rick's course, so I've been reading all the rules for the RPT exam, which I was intending to go over and do sometime, but that's not going to be happening. So that's the first exercise, right? And so I come down, put the jug on, I set A4 5 times. Find A4. The other way, of course, is to put the fork on without that. Put the fork on, play F2. Calibrate that. Somewhere, a good, nice beat rate. So that's the fork in F2. Turn off the fork. Play F or A4 and try to match that now. So that's the other way to do that, is to match those beats rates. So that would be how, if you weren't using that inharmonicity, which sort of bothers me slightly because you're making an assumption about the inharmonicity of A4. Right? So, Rick does all the pianos at the Kennedy Center and he's probably never come across a piano where the inharmonicity of A4 was outside of 2.4%, 2 cents, right? So, because that's the rule that he teaches. This is how you find A4. I don't know. Maybe. I have a feeling that on a smaller piano, it's going to be different, and this rule might not work so well. Rick works on Steinway Ds exclusively, so maybe. I don't know. So you can practice both ways. So that's that. Now let's throw in A3. First of all, I haven't knocked the piano out of tune. Okay, that's randomly knocked the entire piano out of tune. Yeah, the sound effects probably need some work. I've got a little MIDI keyboard here that's plugged into, this is just a browser and a website, okay? There's no software here, this is the website. You probably need to use Google Chrome to make everything work, especially the MIDI keyboard. But if you plug in a MIDI keyboard and use Google Chrome, you can activate the key by clicking on the tuning pin, or if you've got the keyboard, the shortcut is to double tap it. And that throws the tuning pin on that one. So you can basically do it all orally. You don't have to touch anything. So I'll tune just that note. Now I know I've got A4 at 440. See, we're getting flatter and flatter. We can run some we can run some tests. Calibrate this. Use that. So we'll do this, what Rick calls the 310 test. Which one do you think is faster? This one's slow. So we're happy that we're wide of a 4/2 octave.
It does have 3-note polyphony, like you can
Yep.
play.
Yep, okay, I'm happy that's wide of a 4/2. Let's try this one. Just calibrate that to get it to something that we're happy listening to. Which one's faster? You think the second one, the minor third's faster? So that's faster. So we're wide of a 6/3, right? And anytime we want to check it, we turn on our data. Well, that's going at 6.15. That's going at 5.67. So you're right. So we're wide of a 6/3, so you can tune it however you want. So there's our octave. So what that's telling us there, octaves and fifths, it will tell you the 2/1 and the 4/2 and also the 6/3. So the 2/1 side of that is well wide of a 2/1, half a beat per second wide of a 4/2, and even half a beat per second, 0.4 beats per second wide. So if you wanted to tighten that up, so now we're between a 4/2 and a 6/3, which is probably where you'd want to tune the piano. So I'll come down after I'm happy that I can set A4. The next step is setting in, where do you want A3? We'll find I've decided that that's where that A3 on this piano sounds best to me. Right? So where is it? It's 0.93 cents flat. Let's call that 1. But that's where I want it. So I don't want the machine always telling me that I'm a cent flat. So what we then do is to change our calculation, say that right, on this piano, at least at this part of the compass, I want a 1 cent stretch. So if I change that there, my information now has recalibrated, and my A3 is 0.01 cents flat. Right? Now that's not cents flat of 220, that's cents flat of where I want it. Right? And that's how I want to tune this piano. So at least in here, I'm expecting about 1 cent flat. 1 cent of stretch, which technically means there's 1,201 cents in this octave. Right? So, given that, I will then turn off the thing. I will dim the lights and tune. So I'll put. Oh, I only dimmed these lights. I didn't dim those lights. Now I'll set F at 7, and then depending on how if you tune fourths or fifths or whatever, but I'll shut this, look away, using just the arrow keys and my ears and the keyboard. So I'll turn it up and just do this real quick. So quite slow. So find 7 beats a second. They golden better never come around. You don't wanna see your face, you better disappear. More. Just for purposes of this demonstration, let's say that that's it. And at any point in time when you're feeling not confident of where you are, you can look. Oh yeah. Well, that's only 6.12. It's not nearly fast enough. So let's say I didn't look at that. Say I put it there. Fine, I'll leave that there. I thought that was where 7 was. The next step I'd do is, so I'll try to get in, how many do we want here? 8, which to me is semi-quavers at 120. Good old Susan March. That's where I'm. Triplets, that needs to be semi-quavers. That's how I think of these things. It gets me reasonably close. Struggling to hear. When you're struggling to hear it, you can whack on isolate beating partials. And the effect that has it is muted everything except the coincident partials. So you've got the fundamental, and then the 5th partial of that, and the 4th partial of that. So it's a lot easier to hear the beating. So, and then once you get to the point where you can do that without isolating the beating partials, you can put on this one with the note decay. So you need to make your decision quickly. What's the beat rate? Now you gotta decide, or restrike it. You like that beat? Maybe. So I'm using this as testing, right? So I'll just very quickly run in. Maybe I'll just do it by. First of all, I'm going to take that off because it's too hard. You need to be in a quiet room. I'm happy with that. So now what I would probably do is go up here and set that at C sharp. Okay. Far too slow, far too slow. You need to be just a little bit slower than this. Go down and do this one. Yeah, actually. And then I check there to see if I like that fifth. I don't like it, but just for the purpose of I'll just run around here real quick here. It's going to be lower. Lower still. Close. Check that against the fifth.
PlayStation. Yeah, that's pretty fun.
We can, if you have I've only got a 2-octave keyboard here, but if you know, you could do a test for how wide that fifth is by doing that. So I probably need to calibrate that. It's probably a little bit wide. Maybe, don't know. I'll just finish off here this. Far too wide, but I've got a couple left. Now octave. So we made this a 6/3, almost a 6/3 octave. We probably want to make this almost a 6/3 octave. Check our contiguous thirds. Not fast enough. Oh, I haven't tuned it. Okay, I think I've got every close enough. Yeah. Okay, not very good, right? So, where's our report? Temper report. Okay. So, here's how we did. And we're only interested in the middle column here because we've only done the temperament octave, right? F3 to F4. So that tells you where you are. It will also tell you we're off the side. That would have got me a 95 on the RPT exam. Now, interestingly enough, the question is, if you considered this as a little different stretch, watch what happens when I change the stretch. So everything's slightly, oh, sorry, I'm moving it the wrong way. We can get a little bit better if we decide that we didn't stretch it. If we call this 0.8 cent stretch instead of 1 cent stretch, our score gets a little better. So, you know, it's all sort of give and take. And the point is where do you want to tune that particular instrument?
Yeah.
Right? So I would set the stretch now, at the point I am. I come down in the morning, I set A4, I check it, set it exactly on 440. I then tune the temperament octave. and then I check to see how far I need to stretch it to give myself a good score.
Mm.
Right? And I hope that it's going to be around a 6/3 octave at A3 to A4. So what this does for me is it completely removes the physical difficulties of tuning a piano. Right? This is totally ear training only,
Yeah.
which, given what I know now, is probably 10 to 15% of the problem. Right? Now I've got the 85% of the problem. I know where I want to put that note. I've got to get it there. That's another 50%. And then I've got to make it stay there. That's another 35%. Right? But the 15% of the problem of your training your ear to find where you want to put that note is completely removed. Right? And so I've introduced this to Rick, expecting that it takes half of his workload off. You give you the theory, you give you this temper tool, and go to it. You do it until you can do it. So at the moment, I come down in the morning, pretty much every morning, and while coffee's being made, I'll throw in a temperament, and I'll make sure that I'll do 2 temperaments before I have my first cup of coffee. And if I can't get it within a cent, and generally I try to get within a half a cent across the temperament. Right? And if you can do that 2 or 3 times every morning before you have your first cup of coffee, then I'm through with the tool. Right?
Yeah.
There's nothing there. Now I've got the other part of the problem to show. Right? So this is tempertool.com. So everyone's welcome. It's free at the moment. I do ask you to sign up. You can go to tempertool.com. If you're not logged in, you can actually take the temper test, which asks you to do 2 things. One is set A4, see how you do, and then it will grade you on that. It'll set A4 to 440, and then it asks you to tune. So proceed to step 1. Tells you. So there we go. You turn on the tuning fork. Set A4. So for all of the clients that say, "Oh, I'm just going to go get a tuning lever. I've got a good ear. I can tune this piano myself," send them here and say, "Yeah, have a go. See how you do." And I think the results will surprise most people, because you can't. If you don't know those tests, obviously this is why you've got a job. So you throw that in. There's a timer on there, so you can see how fast you can set this temperament. So let's just, that's good enough. Continue to step 2. So it tells you where it started and where you set it and what your score was. Okay, that was 76, that still would have passed. So now it's already set A4 to 440, and now you do what I just did, is quickly throw in a temperament octave, F3 to F4, and then it'll give you the score. So after you do it, it'll say, I do ask you a couple of questions before I show you the score. This is my first time, just giving it a go. I'm going to be interested in the wider usage of this to find out the distributions of the scores of people that are here versus people that are here versus people. Right? So you can do it completely anonymously, but I'm going to know, something depending on how you answer that question, and then you get to see your results. Well, there's what you did. I'll show you the 2 steps of those, how you did it. Now behind the scenes, I am putting a little unique token in your browser so that if you sign up, if your next step is to give me your email address and your name, so you can sign up and you actually use the temper tool, the piano, practice piano, you can pull that setting back in and see what you did wrong. Right, so that's been set. So if I quit here now, and then I log in, I can go to the practice piano and start tuning. I can retrieve the tuning that I just did right now, and now it's in there and I can see what was wrong. Well, first of all, I set that to sharp. I need that to be a little faster. That wasn't fast enough, etc., etc. can see where you, everything's infinite for some reason. It's probably because the stretch hasn't been recorded. But anyway, so that's the temperature tool. You're all welcome to have a go.
So you need to have the MIDI keyboard.
Sorry? No,
you need
you don't have to. I mean, you can use an iPad. If you use the iPad, it's got a slider. But the slider goes away as soon as you use an arrow key. Right? So, yeah, I mean, you can click on a key and
Oh, right, oh, okay.
and then you can
Oh, that would be quick. Oh,
you can do that. It's pretty
Uh-huh.
slow. It's pretty slow. I think you spend 10 seconds here and you go, oh yeah. Get. So, and these are pretty cheap. So anyway, that's temperature.
Crazy. Like,
Any questions?
blown away because I've been asking computer gurus for probably 10 years what would it take to write that program like that. And I even got two synths and put them side by side because you could detune the synths to get to hear your beat speeds. When I was trying to learn how to do it, have you got a clue as to how long it took you to write the program?
That?
Yeah.
Well, the idea came in pretty quickly in a couple of days, and then I thought actually I could hook a MIDI keyboard up to that.
Yeah.
And so that took me another couple of days, and then some bells and whistles came on, and then there's a bunch of shortcut keys here. All these interval shortcut keys, which different gauge tools. Now these are gauge tools that, oral gauges that Rick teaches in his course on how to see the width of various intervals. And these are shortcuts, so like the minor third, major third, fifth gauge, if I do a minor third, so this gauges the width of a fifth, right? So you basically need to make sure that minor third is faster than that major third, but not much. The wider it is, the more the difference is. So if you don't have a MIDI keyboard, I've got shortcut keys here, so you can do all of these tests, but just use a keyboard because
Keyboard's fantastic.
it's more natural. And furthermore, I've also, in the setup, I've made it, there's a separate, more options, here we are. So you can use MIDI keys. If you've got a wider keyboard, I've set this up so I can actually use 4 keys on the MIDI keyboard as the up arrows, and the big up arrows and the little up arrows. And so I set that to my G, G sharp, A sharp, and B, which I'm not tuning as part of the temperament. And those are my little adjustments, gross adjustments on the outside. And so I can do everything from here rather than using a hand over there. I can do everything. So if I had a bigger keyboard, I'd put those up here.
Yeah.
Or if I were left-handed, I'd move them down here. But
Explain your own piano.
so this, since I'm a software guy, I sort of can see this as my contribution to the profession because I'm already in my 50s, right? I'm never going to be a crack hot technician because it takes time to do that. I don't have that time. So hopefully this will help. Hopefully this will help anyone else that's at this stage. Or if you take the exam, I reckon you need to be able to do 100% within a cent within 10 minutes. Because this is a really easy piano to tune. There's no sticking pins, it's not popping around, it's just, you should be able to do it really quickly. And if you can't, a little bit of time, no problem. If anybody has a full set of inharmonicity characteristics of a particular piano, I'd love to have them. I'll add them to the database. So instead of a 6-foot grand, you can tune a spin.
Well, we can easily provide you with more information.
Love to have them.
Easily.
Awesome.
So you could write the inharmonicity constant for every note.
Yep.
So
So we can do that with TuneLab, and then you can put it to export the data.
Yep. That's all and I only need C2 through C5.
Yeah.
The frequencies outside of that are too hard for
Yeah,
speakers.
exactly. So C2 to C5.
Yes, Grant. Oh, was that a
Oh,
question? Oh, sorry. Any other questions?
This is brilliant.
It's wonderful, Matt.
Yeah.
How do we play?